This is Southern FM.
88.3 Southern FM.
Yes, indeed. And this is Best Medicine with me, Gaytana. And on the line, I have my guest, Dr. Dennis Wormald, who's a veterinarian with a PhD in dog anxiety, and he's just released a new book, A Dedication to Difficult Dogs. And he wants, and I'm quoting his words here, to spread awareness of ethical dog behaviour management in our modern society. Hello, Dennis. Welcome.
Hello. Thank you for having me on. I'm so excited to talk about all things dog behaviour today.
Yes, very good. And I'm sure that a lot of people will be sitting up listening hard because dogs are just beloved pets. There are a lot of families with their dogs and sole individuals living alone for whom the dog is a really significant companion, isn't he or she?
Absolutely. And, you know, that bond between the dog and the family is just such a beautiful thing. I think that cross-species communication that we have with each other, there's just something so magical about it. And I just love making sure that not only are we getting the most out of our dogs, but also that our dogs are getting the most out of us as well.
And that's really important, and that we find ways to really understand the dog's behaviour. And of course, now I've read the first chapter of your book. You sent me that, so that is very illuminating because it's from the dog's point of view, and it does show us how sometimes we are projecting our way of thinking, behaving, etc. onto the dog, whereas we need to be paying perhaps more attention to the cues from the dog and trying to understand what's going on and why. Am I on track there?
Yes, that's completely right. And I think as people, we're a social species. We're used to reading the body language of other humans and people, and we're a primate, essentially. So we've evolved to read primate animal body language or human body language. And dogs are a very, very different species. And so our natural inclination of what a dog might be thinking is not always actually correct. Sometimes the dog's actually feeling a very different way to what we might imagine. So it does mean that there's a lot of sort of, I guess, bias out there of people to naturally feel like they understand their dog a lot more than they do, particularly in situations where they're having problems with their dog's behaviour. So those are common examples of where people just need a little bit of help and a little bit of more of understanding of what's going on. So yes, as you might have seen in the first chapter, it does really show that striking difference between what can go on in a dog's mind and what can go on in the mind of the person in the same situation, and can lead to a lot of problems.
Yes, and what's interesting is Alan, the dog in the first chapter, with his people, Petra and Nathan, Alan is actually a puppy. He's a young dog learning about the world, and I don't know what age he was meant to be when he went to them. I think you sort of mentioned, not the age, but he's been with them for a few months. He's not learning it as he might from his mother dog or within a small group of dogs. He's having to find his way with human beings who are his people, and in a world that's full of a lot of new and challenging things.
Absolutely. It's a very realistic story. It really is getting inside the mind of a dog and seeing exactly the kind of things they experience, and just common things that we don't even think twice about, like saying no to your dog, or doing toilet training, or even taking to the park to socialise. It is, these puppies, they don't have their mother around. You're completely right, and the mother and other dogs can read dog body language very well, but we can't. And so, well, not naturally. You can learn, absolutely. And the book really helps you learn. But it's really, it just highlights some of those issues that happen when there's that miscommunication, when raising a puppy,
And we'll talk about a number of things and more about the book in a moment. But picking up on what you said minutes ago about saying no to the dog and what have you, in the early part of that chapter, poor little Alan has once again weed on the carpet. So Petra takes him to the laundry, and he's got his favourite little soft bunny toy there with him, but he's been popped in there and the door closed, and he doesn't understand why. It sort of seems like a punishment or something, and he's separated from them, and he's upset, isn't he?
Absolutely. You know, that I think that people sometimes forget that it's not all about teaching a dog right and wrong and what's good and what's bad. It's actually about understanding they've got certain needs that need to be met, just like a little baby do. Sometimes they need to go to the toilet, sometimes they need to eat, sometimes they want to play. And if they're not getting those needs met, then they might end up doing the wrong thing that we think is naughty. And then if we then go and try and punish that behaviour, they often don't know what we're doing. They don't understand it, and we think we're trying to do the right thing, but it's just a big mess, really.
Yes.
It gets quite difficult.
Yeah, and I like that in the sort of preface forward, whatever, to the book, you do talk about, excuse me, that you're the people you're talking, the human beings you're talking about who have the dogs, and this book isn't looking at any particular individual, but generally, and pulling together your knowledge and expertise over many years, the people are well-meaning. So it's not an attempt to beat up the human beings. It's just an attempt to enlighten and educate, isn't it?
It is, and I personally, I never blame the owner or say that they're a bad owner. People love their pets. They love their dogs. They try really hard, and they want to do the right thing. It's just that it is difficult because it's not a natural thing for us to understand dog behaviour. It has to be learnt. And so absolutely, you know, there's a lot of examples all through the book of things that are very real that I see many times before with my dog behaviour cases. And so, yes, it's not about blaming them, but, you know, what does happen is sometimes if you are enlightened and you do suddenly realise with perfect hindsight that you may have made mistakes in the past, then I have had a bit of feedback from some people that say they love the book so much, but they feel a little bit bad about what they used to do. And I think, look, it's just part of growing and growth, and they're very glad they've read it, and they're glad that now they understand, but at the same time they think, oh gosh, why did I do that? And I feel the same way about my first puppy that I had when I was a little kid. I didn't know better, and you can't blame the people, but that's no excuse for not educating yourself and bringing yourself up to speed now.
Yeah, exactly. And I'm going to jump around a little bit, but it really got to me, the story about Alan in the park and socialising with other dogs. And I thought, there are a lot of things to learn from that situation. He's going around and suddenly he's knocked over by this big pointer who also pins him to the ground, and he's really scared, isn't he, poor little dog?
He is. The poor puppy's very scared, but the thing is, if you were there, and I mean in the book I do a great job of explaining the body language, but this pointer is not aggressive or mean. He just wants to play. He's a bit overly boisterous, and he's overly friendly, and he knocks over Alan, and Alan, from his point of view, it's completely shocked, a bit like I can imagine, and you know, in the school playground, sometimes some kids get a little bit rough, and they're just having fun, but you know, it can be really distressing for some of the other children. So
exactly,
very similar thing goes on,
and this is where we need a gentle intervention, and perhaps to settle the big dog a bit and move the other one, young Alan, away. But the interesting thing is that because he's been so upset and shaken by it, he's not going to be on the back foot again. So unfortunately, with a nice little terrier that's just being inquisitive and actually looks as though it wants to be friendly, he goes on the bite, doesn't he, Alan?
Absolutely, yeah. The poor little thing, he's had a negative experience for one of his first outings to meet another dog. He's had a big, scary experience, and it's just another example of where, you know, socialisation, it's so important, but again, sometimes the message gets lost and people think that, that means I have to socialise my dog and get it to meet a million dogs, as many dogs as possible. But really, it's about just having, you know, regular, well-planned out, positive, happy introductions, because what is a traumatic childhood memory from a person's point of view? It's a very fearful memory you had as a kid, right?
Yeah, yeah.
And the same things happens with puppies. If they have a few traumatic experiences, their first outing to the park, it can set them up for life, unfortunately, to be scared of other dogs. And it's just a terrible outcome.
Yeah, and it's what we don't want. We want them to feel comfortable and relaxed and everything. So there's so much wisdom, and I'm going to go back to what you said a few moments ago, and which, in fact, you've mentioned in your dedication. You say, I dedicate this book to my own dogs, Bungie and Oscar, who suffered from anxiety, and taught me a lot about how I can help the other dogs I meet. Talk to us a bit about that.
Look, I think if you speak to any veterinarian, that pretty much all of us have pets. The diseases that our own pets have teach us to be pretty much the best possible vet for that disease, if that makes any sense, because you're living with the patient 24/7 and you're really getting to know them. And so Oscar was an example of a rescue dog that I had. That I got him at the age of 8, actually, and he sadly passed away earlier this year at the age of 14. So he did very well with lifespan, but he had come to me with no fat or muscle on him. He was skin and bones, literally. His other dog he'd been living with had passed away when they rescued him. So I fed him up and looked after him, but lo and behold, like what happens sometimes with rescues is I realised within a few weeks that he had separation anxiety, thunderstorm and firework phobias. He was extremely aggressive to other dogs on walks. He was what you call a difficult dog. But I loved him to bits. And so managing that and helping him to get over all those things while I was also doing my PhD and studying dog behaviour, it just really it added a real sort of personal touch to what I was going through.
Yeah. And of course that helps because it not only helps for in your work as a vet for the dogs, but it also helps with understanding the owners and how they feel and react. It's a combination of both, and they're going to need some real helpful guidance to get through, aren't they?
Yeah, they are. I really feel for the owners of dogs that have got mental health challenges, as I like to call them, because ultimately that is often what it is. If you've got a dog that's just really difficult to manage their behaviour, it's often emotionally driven, or almost always emotionally driven, and it's often those negative emotions like fear and anxiety and all of that. And so, managing it, it can be real tough. Yeah, really tough.
And of course, there are so many things that dogs can develop, diseases, conditions, etc. It seems to me, and correct me if I'm wrong, that almost all the major things that we get as human beings, dogs can get too. They can develop arthritis, they can develop cancers, and so on, can't they? Absolutely right, yeah. So I think people are used to hearing that arthritis and cancer can be things that dogs can get and people can get too. But, mental health, like awareness and education in the human world, it's gone through a real, renaissance in the last 20 years. It has absolutely gone forward leaps and bounds. And, compared 50 years ago, the common knowledge of people about things like anxiety, depression, compared to now, it's gone so far. And yet, with our animals, people haven't really made that same shift. So society hasn't really moved forwards in terms of the common knowledge and understanding. The professionals have come a long way in the last sort of 20 years, but bringing everyone else up to speed, unfortunately, it's going to take time. And that's one of the reasons of having this book out, is to help spread that awareness. Yes. Yeah. And I think there are a lot of long-standing myths about other creatures that need to be dispelled. I think, unfortunately, for too many generations and centuries, the attitude to other creatures was that they didn't feel, didn't think in any way. They mightn't think in our language, but they think in their own way. They remember they all sorts of things. So, we do need to dispel those terrible myths. Other creatures do think, feel, react. I can remember years and years ago, when I was much younger, seeing a small group of minor birds on the road, and one bird had been killed and another one was just screaming, and I think it was just absolute grief. I really do. Yeah,
it's just so sad. And I think, scientifically, there is no debate around this. There's no debate around whether animals feel emotions and pain and all of that. It's well and truly, that's old news. We're far past that point. And so, all of those emotions that animals feel and that people feel, like fear and anxiety and happiness and joy, they all come from a part of the brain that in all mammals,
we all share.
Very well conserved. We all share it. We all got the same bits, and they do the same thing in the different animals. It's just, we've got an extra layer of intelligence that is very unique, but that intelligence, it's not the same as emotions, right? The emotions, we aren't emotionally very smart at all. We're just logically very intelligent as creatures. Emotionally, we're no smarter than a dog.
No,
really.
and emotions can drive us. Logic can say one thing and reason and sense, but emotions can be very, very powerful. That is for
Don't we all
sure.
know that?
Oh, yes, I think we all know that. And, we can look at all those things, love and attachment from our creatures. And I will tell you a little story, a couple of little stories from my experience from childhood. The first dog that my parents bought, and it was interesting, my mother told me later on, and I don't remember this as a toddler, but apparently as a toddler, I was the kind of kid who always wanted to run up and embrace any dog I saw. And she was,
God.
Yeah, she was terrified I was going to get bitten, you see. And she thought, oh, God, we've got to get we've got to get a dog. And she was a little bit scared herself. But anyway, they got a beautiful female black cocker spaniel, and she had the gentlest nature. She was spayed. She was very lovely. What was interesting was there were a couple of times in life where I don't know where she found them, but she actually sort of kind of helped mother some little puppies that had been she found them and she sort of mothered them, and she was fabulous. So it's interesting how creatures can be kind to each other, and we perhaps and sort of other focus, we don't realise that as well. And also with the love thing, I know people are quite often, especially people who are dog people, think that cats are awful, but I look at each creature and I try and see and understand them. And some years ago, a stray cat appeared and just didn't want to go away, and I walked the streets in our area trying to find if anyone knew who owned the cat. No. And we thought, goodness, it was summer. It was, holiday time. We thought if we try and give her to some refuge place or whatever, they'll be overwhelmed and she'll be put down. She was a little thing, and we wondered, she's very timid, we wondered if she might even be a pregnant cat, so we took her along to the vet. No, that was fine, but she was always a small, undersized little black and white cat.
Yeah.
And we took her on. And, of course, we were both pretty loving and affectionate and playful and things. And she really grew very confident. And I can tell you how affectionate she could be. Sometimes if you picked her up, she would not only snuggle into you and purr, but she would put a paw either side of your neck. And other times I might be having a little rest on the couch, and she would stand up on the edge of the couch and look at me as if to say, can I come up? And I'd say, okay, come on up. She was so small, and she would lie along the length of my body and look in my face and be purring. And again, sometimes a paw would come out and stroke my face. Now, that's love, isn't it?
That is such a beautiful story, and that's such a lovely example of a bond. And I think, but I'm not sure, that I think that some of the people that are they say they're the dog people and they don't like cats at all, I think that maybe they might need to learn a bit more about cat behaviour as well, because certainly they behave very, very differently. And if you're expecting a cat to behave like a dog, well, it's
not going to happen.
Because most cats don't. Look, there's some that have more dog-like qualities, but they're very different, and they're beautiful in their own way, and you can learn to appreciate the differences in their behaviour, I think, as well, once you do get them. I think, it all comes down to expectations as well, and what you expect an animal to do. And if you're expecting it to come up wagging its tail, then, that's a dog, not a cat.
And dogs and cats can both be quite willful in their own way, and some dogs are more willful than others, and some of it is to do with anxiety, or it is to do with wanting what they want and knowing that with some of their people that they can, get what they want. People need to be a bit careful when they're thinking of a dog being very willful and stubborn. Some people actually go on and then think that, maybe the dog is dominant, right? Mm-hmm. Have you heard that term before? About people? Yes.
Yeah. And so I had a case a couple of weeks ago, actually, and I won't, reveal the name for confidentiality. Mm-hmm. But so in this case, this poor dog, he had a few issues. He was very worried about a range of things. But one thing that he used to do is he would stand up on the top of the couch, the sofa edge, right at the back, as, the people were sitting down watching telly, and he'd stand towering over them. And these owners, they were just worried, and they said, look, I think my dog might be really dominant because he keeps standing and towering over me. And after about half an hour into the consultation, I realised that this dog loved having chest scratches, but hated being touched on the top of the head. And so this dog was positioning itself so that it could get chest scratches, but so that the people couldn't reach the top of the head. And it was just an example of where people try to fit behaviours into completely wrong interpretations of them, because dominance, if you're thinking that your dog's dominant, I hate to say, that's an old theory.
Yeah.
So that's the one that we used to use a long time ago, and it's just not needed anymore. And so this was a lovely case of a dog just getting in the right spot to get the right scratch rather than being dominant.
And just being able to know that would change the whole dynamics of the situation and make it easier for people. It's very interesting. It's fascinating. I don't tend to have patted heads so much. I tend to pat smooth along the back or the flanks and things like that, or see if a dog wants a little gentle touch, as you say, under the chin or on the top of the chest, just a gentle stroke. And I don't tend to sort of pat up and down. I tend to sort of stroke gently if that's what's wanted. So, I think
it's
go on.
I think it's about asking the dog, and what I mean by asking the dog is you don't say, "Is this okay to them?" You watch their body language and see how they respond.
Yes.
And if they're backing away every time you're doing something, then you need to learn and notice that, actually.
Yeah.
Because these clients, they weren't noticing that. They would often just reach their hand out to pat the dog on the head, and sometimes it was okay with it, but other times it did back away, and they didn't realise. And so, absolutely, noticing is very, very important.
It's like, you see it in old movies and things, and I used to cringe as a child watching them, where adults would come and pat a kid on the head, and I'd think, oh, don't do it. I can't stand it, It's awful. And ruffling a kid's hair, and I used to think, would you like that done to you, Probably wouldn't, so don't do it to the child.
Yeah, and things like this happen in all sorts of situations with dogs, and we do not have time to go over them all here, but there's a whole range of examples in the book of things like this where people and dogs just have different understandings of the world, and it just causes these issues. Yeah, absolutely.
Now, Dennis, correct me if I'm wrong, my impression of the book is that you actually have I think 2 dogs. There's another dog about to be introduced, Nella, in chapter 2. And so I suspect that we're following these 2 dogs with their people, and that allows you to cover a whole range of subjects. Is that right? So it's fiction, but based on knowledge of people and dogs and other things, and pulling together no specific person or animal identified, but it shows from, say, dogs' points of view what they need and how situations affect them. Is that right?
Yeah, exactly right. And the journey that these 2 dogs go on, it's a lovely story about common things, but bringing a new light and a new vision on what we see as day to day with our pets, and seeing it from a new perspective that makes it seem like a real adventure, and it is for them. And so seeing it from their point of view, absolutely, it's exciting. But the other thing that it provides also is, at the end of each chapter, there's a little reflection where I break out of the story form, and we just have a very short, very digestible little section of dog theory with some references, some scientific references to back up everything in case you're interested in more reading, so that you can actually glean even more and go even deeper into the theory in a very, very digestible way, because it reflects back on the story. And so there's examples of everything I'm talking about, so it makes it nice and light to read. I think people do say to me that they get through this book very quickly. It's a very easy read, despite it having a lot of very useful theory in it.
And also, of course, chapter by chapter, it means they can take their time if they want to. If they are busy and what have you, they don't have to read it all in one sitting. They can go through bit by bit. Yeah. And when they find things that are particularly relate to them, their situations, their particular dogs, they can stop and take a bit more time if they want to. So I think that's a really good way to do it. And I just loved it being from the dog's point of view, because that really is illuminating. And I think it really helps us to do a job of better understanding, Yeah, really important.
That's exactly the whole point of that. The whole reason it was written from that perspective is it's the best way, I think, for people to learn about how a dog thinks, is to get inside their mind.
Yes.
Yeah.
Now, look, Dennis, tell people how they can get your book and give them your website, etc., please.
Yeah, of course. So the best way, if you're using a search engine, is just to search for Dennis Wormald, my name, DennisWormald, and then just write book afterwards, and it will come up. It'll be easy to find that way, but also you can go to my website, which is www.abadog.com/difficult-dogs.
Yep.
And that will also come up pretty near the top of the search rankings as well if you search what I said before.
Good.
So either way is fine. And I'm on Twitter as well at Dennis Wormald if you want to see me there.
Good, good. Are you heading for Threads or not?
Oh, well, I do have a new account, and I'm going to give it a shot, but we'll see what happens there.
Yeah. There's always more, isn't there, really?
I know. I don't have enough time.
Well, that is one of the problems too, isn't it?
Yeah, too many.
Yeah. Now, and I'm right, it is a dedication to difficult dogs. Is that correct?
Yes, that is
the
completely
title.
right. Yeah.
Well, look, we'll have to talk again, I know, because I think we can do with some, every so often, some more input about not only the dogs but other creatures as well, because people have all sorts of different pets and they need some insights and advice and so on. So this is lovely, and it's been lovely to connect, and I'm so glad you contacted Southern FM, Dennis.
Yes, absolutely. I would love to come back and chat more. I love chatting all things animal behaviour.
Oh, well, that's brilliant. So thank you so much. So people, keep in mind, Dr. Dennis Wormald, and put in that his name, or go to abadog.com/difficult-dogs or -dogs. And we will talk again, Dennis, and thank you so much for your time today.
Wonderful. Talk again soon. Thanks a lot, Gaytana. Bye.
Bye-bye.